Lorien sat motionless. The high seat of Valor Hall felt like a cage. This tournament, this so-called qualification bout, had long since rotted into a hollow formality. The herald's voice rang out, announcing the hour. Lorien gave a slight nod. 2 words, flat and final. Let it begin. The sound barely left his lips before his gaze slid away. It drifted, almost without thought, toward the quiet chamber behind him. Within that sealed space sat the 7th Prince. And in that stillness, the real power brooded. Deep within the Gu clan ancestral hall, consciousness fell into a void. Shade hung in the darkness, a wraith adrift. His fingertips lifted. A sliver of ghostly light flickered to life. Soulforce wove around it like threads of silk, shimmering and tight. His voice rasped, dry as tomb dust. Spirit Enthrallment Art is no divine ability. It is merely a technique for wielding Soulforce, a pause heavy with bitterness. And your Soulforce exceeds that of most men by far. His heart bled with every syllable. That Soulforce should have been his. Every strand, every breath of it. Stolen. Kael nodded. In his eyes, that faint light reflected, cold and steady. His answer fell flat as a blade on stone. I understand. He turned to leave. Then stopped. That favor. It still stands, Shade cursed inwardly, a silent scream in the dark. But no sound escaped. Only the weight of a debt unpaid. Outside, the shouts of the Gu family clansmen droned on and on. Curses. Accusations. A buzzing swarm of venom. The great doors of the ancestral hall burst open. Kael stepped forth, cradling Thuron's spirit tablet against his chest. Silence fell like an axe. Absolute. Suffocating. Folly, we're leaving. He drew his sword. He ignored the stares boring into his back, each one a silent dagger. Folly stood rigid, eyes red, rimmed, glaring at the crowd. She scrubbed the tears from her cheeks with a fierce, trembling hand. Then Kael stopped. The blade shuddered. Wenged. A shriek tore through the air. 2 arcs of razor, edged sword intent lashed out. The sound was ripping silk, the air itself sheared apart. Green roof tiles shattered, exploding into dust. Thick pillars snapped with a thunderous crack, splinters flying like shrapnel. The entire imposing ancestral hall groaned, buckled, and collapsed. A mountain of rubble crashed down amid roiling dust clouds. The shockwave billowed outward, snapping robes and cloaks like whips. Under the ashen faces of the Gu family, Kael walked away. He never looked back. In the grand arena, a crimson gale howled. Auron's lance swept forward, wrapped in that bloody wind. Another opponent flew from the stage, trailing a spray of crimson. Auron stood with the weapon in one hand, surveying the field. Arrogance dripped from every line of his face. Next, the crowd beneath the stage buzzed with praise, a chorus of fawning voices. Ahead, Eldric smiled smugly, basking in reflected glory. But the heads of Zhang clan and Wang clan chimed in, their voices barbed and sharp. Auron is strong, but he still falls short of Kael. Not just short. Far short, Eldric's face darkened to thunder. A patricide and a sinner, is he even worthy of being mentioned in the same breath? A cold laugh answered. Ha, then why hasn't your Gu family's bounty managed to bring him in? Eldric's sneer carved deep lines around his mouth. Within half a day at most, that vile wretch will be dead. On the platform, Auron looked utterly composed. But his gaze flicked every so often toward the quiet chamber behind Lorien. A hunter watching a greater predator's den. Inside that chamber, the 7th Prince broke into a violent fit of coughing. The sound was wet, tearing. Vic hurriedly channeled his spirit energy into the prince, a warm current against failing flesh. But the 7th Prince waved a hand, the gesture weary and final. Conserve your strength. It's no use. He glanced outside, eyes finding the young man on the arena. That young one's strength isn't bad for his age. Him, Vic scoffed, the sound sharp with contempt. You call that talent? If we're speaking of true potential, Elder Zu and I once came across someone in the wildwood. His mind turned to Kael. His face instantly blackened like a pot's bottom. What's wrong? The 7th Prince asked. Nothing. Vic masked his expression, smoothing it to stone. Your Highness, the matches are nearly over. We should return to Elder Zu's side. Outside, the silence stretched. No challengers came. Auron's prideful smile spread wider, a predator bearing teeth. No one else. As expected, all flash and no substance, Lorien began to rise. The words of conferral gathered on his tongue. Then a low, gravelly voice cut through the air like a rusted blade. Wait, the crowd rippled with confusion. Heads turned, searching. No one could spot the source, but Lorien's gaze had already locked on. As if parted by an invisible hand, the throng split open. A path appeared. Kael walked in. His left arm clutched a spirit tablet close to his chest. His right hand led folly. His robes hung in tatters, revealing hideous wounds beneath. Blood had dried to a dark, rust-red hue under the sun's merciless eye. Each step he took seemed to land squarely on the heartbeat of every onlooker. Thud, thud. A pulse of dread. His face was utterly devoid of expression, a mask carved from stone and suffering. He made his way to the edge of the arena and stopped. Kael, Auron's expression instantly darkened, a storm gathering. Kael regarded him steadily, eyes like cold wells. The Valor Hall qualification. It's mine. If you want it, you'll have to get past me first. Inside the quiet chamber, the seventh prince had been on the verge of leaving. Now a sudden spark of interest ignited in his eyes, bright and sharp. Vic, it seems the excitement isn't over. Vic stared at that figure below. His face turned black as a pot's bottom. He cursed the cruel hand of fate inwardly, every oath unspoken but felt. The seventh prince caught his strange expression. Curiosity laced his voice. You know him as well. I saw him once from a distance. Vic's face glowered, shadows pooling in his expression. He began to recount the events that had transpired in the Wildwood. Outside, new voices rose. Exactly. Can't even let a man finish his words. Does Skyblade City truly now bear the surname Gu? The heads of the Zhang and Wang clans stood with folded arms and cold smiles. Their voices were not loud, but they ripped through the silence like blades. Eldric's face was ashen iron. The muscles at the corner of his eyes twitched violently. He ignored the two men entirely. Instead, he clasped his hands fiercely toward Lorien, seated in the place of honor. City Lord, this boy is the shame of the Gu family, and an even greater disgrace to Skyblade City. I beg you to seize him at once. Inside, he was cursing to the high heavens. Cedric and his crew of 6 transcendent realm fighters had encircled the boy. And yet that wretched spawn had still crawled out alive. Lorien's gaze fell upon the blood-soaked figure below the stage. His brow furrowed deep. His voice dropped low, heavy with authority. Kael, stand down. I want fairness. Kael looked him straight in the eye. Blood ran down from his hairline in rivulets. But his eyes were as dry as a barren well in the wilderness. Empty, unblinking. Lorien narrowed his eyes. The faint notion he had once entertained, betrothing Ione to this young man, had long since been ground to dust, crushed by the infamy of patricide, crushed by the body of a cripple. Now, with the seventh prince in Skyblade City, Ione was falling over herself to ingratiate. What was Kael anymore? Less than nothing? Insolence, Lorien slammed the armrest and shot to his feet. Men, take him! A voice trance! Mitted message entered his ear, silent and swift. His expression abruptly shifted. His gaze swept over Kael's face, lingered, and slowly withdrew. When he seated himself once more, his tone had completely transformed. Smooth, almost gracious. Very well. I will grant you this opportunity. Eldric rushed forward a step, desperation cracking his voice. City Lord, you... Enough? Watch and be silent. Lorien flicked his sleeve and spared Eldric no further glance. Inside the quiet chamber, faint incense smoke curled upward in lazy spirals. Vic's mouth twisted nearly to his chin. Your Highness, that brat's temper is foul and unyielding. Why trouble yourself over him? The seventh prince gave him a sidelong look. The ghost of a smile played on his lips. Your prejudice is showing. Regardless, the beast cores from that ember serpent were his gift. A kindness repaid. I ought to at least give him a chance in return. Vic's face went green. That was obviously a fair trade for the ghost doctor's own refined pill medicine. The boy had profited enormously already. On the arena floor, Kael turned. His gaze cleaved through the strangled silence. It pinned Auron like a spear through flesh. Auron, fight me, a breath of wind. A sudden freeze. Do you dare? His clothing was soaked dark crimson with blood. Several savage wounds parted the flesh grotesquely, white bone glinting beneath. Yet his aura did not falter. It surged. Like a gravely wounded beast closing in step by step, the pressure descended. Auron's breathing shortened. He felt it catch in his chest, a hitch of primal fear. A Goo family clansman staggered to Eldric's side and whispered frantically into his ear.
Crack!
The sturdy armrest of Eldric's chair exploded to powder in his grip. Wood splinters, mixed with murderous intent, sprayed outward. Little wretch courting death. On the platform, Auron had been pushed to the edge of a cliff. His jaw clenched tight. He stared deadly at the wounds on Kael's body, wounds that went so deep the bone was visible. He could see the damage. He could see weakness. His voice rose, sharp and sudden.
Fine.
Today I will cleanse the Goo family's door and remove this blight once and for all. Had Kael been whole, he would never have dared to accept. But in this state, with Auron's own cultivation and divine ability greatly advanced, why shouldn't he win? Victory was assured. Merely a matter of finishing the broken thing. Kael handed the spirit tablet into Folly's grasp. His fingers lingered a moment on the polished wood. Then he stepped unhurriedly onto the arena. His feet left dark crimson prints on the green stone, a trail of accusation. His voice rang out, clear and carrying. Today I will avenge my foster father. A low, explosive clamor burst from the crowd below. He said, "Avenge Patriarch Goo." Wasn't the Patriarch killed by him? Shut up and watch. Whoosh on the arena, Auron swept his lance into position. His cultivation instantly surged to its peak. A blinding layer of red light erupted from his dantian like molten lava. It raced down his meridians, engulfing his hands, his arms, the entire shaft of the lance. The red light converged frantically at the lance tip, condensing into a searing vortex of energy. The air around it distorted in the heat. Waves of scorching air buffeted outward, shimmering with killing intent. Form and spirit in perfect unison, a Goo family clansman's voice cracked with excitement. The young lord has pushed the blazing flame art to perfect unison. Dealing with a critically wounded Kael will be no harder than turning over a palm. Behind the crowd, a grey-robed wandering cultivator let a snort of laughter escape his nose. The sound was soft, utterly cold. "What are you laughing at?" A clansman spun, face red with fury. The cultivator's voice drifted back, calm as falling ash. "At your young lord's delusions of grandeur. When his head rolls off in a moment, don't weep. Nonsense. The young lord wields a supreme grade spirit weapon. Against that broken iron blade of Kael's." The wandering cultivator said nothing more. He only fixed his frigid stare back on the arena, for he had personally witnessed the chilling lethality of that broken iron blade when it split the air.
Kael.
On the platform, Auron's eyes were bloodshot, his roar squeezed through gritted teeth. "Today, I'll use your life to prove my name." Before his words could fully fade, he lunged. His form blurred into a streak of motion. The menacing lance tip screamed through the air, aimed straight for Kael's glabella. The red light swelled again at that moment, painting the entire arena the color of a smelting furnace. Kael did not move a muscle. The lance tip shattered the air, closing within half a foot. He drew his sword, slashed down. A single cut.
Clang.
A metallic ripping shriek so sharp it nearly pierced eardrums. Where blade met lance shaft, a shower of resplendent spiritual light detonated like fireworks. The shaft of the supreme, grade spirit weapon gave a groaning cry of unbearable strain. In the next instant, it snapped in two. The lance head thudded uselessly down. The residual spiritual light along the broken shaft scattered like fireflies in the wind, turning to lifeless scrap. And Kael's sword edge had come to rest steady, half an inch before Auron's forehead. A single bead of blood slid slowly down the blade's spine, hot and viscous. Absolute silence. Auron was frozen in place, his pupils shrunk to pinpricks, his lips quivering wordlessly. He looked down at the ruined lance, his pride, his supreme raid spirit weapon, the very foundation of his superiority within the Goo family. Now the residual spiritual energy at the break leaked out with a faint hiss, like the last dying breath of a man on the verge of death. "Impossible, you are clearly wounded," and my cultivation, he muttered, as if trying to convince himself. Kael did not answer. The long sword pressed down a third of an inch. Esasuske, the blade cut through skin. A thread of bright crimson ran down Auron's forehead, past his nose, and dripped onto the arena's stone. Auron was forced to lower his head, his neck stiff and defiant, veins bulging. The long sword pressed further down, inch by inch. Auron's back bent inch by inch, his knees bending with it, until finally, thud, a heavy impact rang out. His knees smashed into the stone, kicking up a fine cloud of dust.
Little beast.
Eldric erupted, his face nearly contorted beyond recognition. Release him, or I'll tear your body to 10,000 pieces.
Speak.
Kael's voice was cold as the grave, utterly unmoved by Eldric's roaring. How did you murder my foster father? He loomed over the kneeling Auron. Deep within his pupils, two cold points of deep, blue luminescence flared like ghost fire.
Spirit Enthrallment Art.
Auron's body convulsed violently. His pupils abruptly dilated, all resistance drained from him in an instant. A vacuous expression settled over his face. His lips parted mechanically. His voice drifted up as though from a deeply buried tomb. Thuron's cultivation was too high. My grandfather could not match him. We bribed Commander Gu to secretly drug Thuron's food and drink. Silence.
Eldric's eyes blazed as if they would split.
His meridians bulged as he prepared to storm the platform.
You will be silent.
Several figures shot out from the flanks. The outclan family heads blocked his path with icy expressions.
Speak. Let him speak.
Let everyone hear just what a sanctimonious, false-hearted face the Gu family truly wears. The opportunity to topple the Gu family stood right before them, and none would tolerate any disruption. Auron's recitation continued, measured, spectral, and emotionless. After the drug took effect, my grandfather secretly took your sword, and together with my father and the two elders, they cornered and attacked Thuron. They never expected his dying counterattack would nearly let him escape. Why? The hand Kael held his sword with trembled faintly, his knuckles white as bone. My foster father labored half his life for the Gu family because he was selfish. Into Auron's hollow tone surged a sudden, thick, undissolvable venom. He was always thinking of you, given every advantage to you.
Why?
His voice seemed dipped in poison. You're nothing but a wild bastard picked up off the street. I am the true bloodline of the Gu family. I should be the young lord. No, I should be the clan head. Every word, every syllable, landed with awful clarity. It was as if an invisible giant hand had seized the entire square by the throat. After a brief, deathly silence, uproar erupted like a collapsed dike.
Vicious?
Vicious beyond measure. So the foremost clan of Skyblade City is nothing but a den of hypocritical beasts. Kael truly was wronged, the deeds of the Gu family, utterly contemptible. Wasn't the greater part of the Gu family's foundations carved out by Thuron and his son? From within the crowd, a cold laugh tore through the noise. The Red Maple Valley mineral vein, the spirit farms outside the city, which one wasn't earned by Kael risking his life? You sanctimonious curs call him a bastard, yet look at yourselves. Who are you worthy of? Every annual Beast Corps tribute, hasn't he always charged first into the savage expanse? Wastes, and you dare accuse him of selfishness. The curses slashed like knives, peeling away mask after mask. The Gu family's faces swelled purple. Shame and rage burned in their chests, yet not one of them could speak a word.
Kael did not spare them a single glance.
He gently withdrew Thuron's spirit tablet and placed it before Auron. With one hand, he wiped.
Clang!
The fire cloud spear slammed into the stone. Sparks sprayed, the shaft's crimson light flowing like thick blood. Its butt end still hummed and vibrated, cracks snaking across the floor. The scorching, iron-cast stench of the weapon burst into the air. From his dimensional pouch, he retrieved heads, one by one. The first, Commander Gu, the second, third the two elders, the fourth Cedric. The four heads rolled to a halt before the spirit tablet, dragging trails of dark crimson. The cloying stench of blood instantly smothered all sound, like an invisible hand clamping down on the throat. Kael slapped his sword onto Auron's shoulder. Even before the blade landed, its chilling sword intent hissed inward and slithered through his meridians like strained threads being methodically sheared. A faint yet appallingly clear series of snaps. Auron's body shuddered violently, his eyeballs nearly bulging from their sockets.
Log.
The searing agony gouged him from his stupor. When his eyes snapped open, he saw his father's ash-gray head.
Father Kael, I'll kill you.
His roar was twisted, his vocal cords threatening to shred. He took part in murdering my foster father. Naturally, he must pay with his life. Kael's voice was low and hoarse. Not far off, Eldric's eyes flared red. A layer of blood, crimson flame ignited around him, like a cornered beast, little beast. I'll butcher you. His form exploded forward, a wave of baking heat rushing in. You've gone too far. Lorien's face was livid. His aura surged. The spiritual pressure of the third sky, condensing realm, slammed down like a mountain. All of you, stop. He flashed between the two men in a single movement. The spirit energy within him erupted, blasting them apart with a thunderous roar. Shockwaves rolled out, and the arena flagstones groaned. Without waiting for them to right themselves, Lorien's palm shot toward Kael's chest. The force of the blow made the air collapse. Kael raised a hasty defense, but the palm force pierced through. A mouthful of blood sprayed from his lips, and he staggered back over 10 feet, his boots grinding 2 pale marks into the stone. Seizing the aftermath of that palm strike, Eldric forcibly suppressed the towering rage in his heart. He offered Lorien a deep, respectful bow. Many thanks, City Lord. After today, Eldric will come personally to the City Lord's mansion to beg forgiveness. I am willing to offer up all family holdings at your sole disposal. Lorien cast him a frigid sidelong glance. Before you come, clean up this wretched mess. Yes, sir. Eldric secretly released a breath of relief. When he turned his head back toward Kael, his eyes were filled with nothing but venom, soaked murderous intent. He would bankrupt the family fortunes. If he must, this boy would have no grave to lie in. Young Master Folly rushed over, weeping. Her thin, small frame shook uncontrollably. Kael wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Under his lowered eyelashes, the light in his pupils grew ever brighter. The blood debt must be paid. The words were quiet, but they struck the eardrums of all present like ice shards. Lorien's face sank entirely. City Lord. Eldric's heart leaped with savage glee. He fanned the flames. This boy is rebellious and lawless, with no regard for anyone. If he is allowed to live today, he will surely become a calamity. Before his words could fall, Kael suddenly raised his hand. A thread of light, so fine and brilliant, shot through the air. The radiance was too fast, too sharp. The air ripped apart with a piercing, sonic shriek. Even Lorien's pupils had only time to shrink. Thwip! A soft sound. A fist-sized hole of blood abruptly blossomed in Eldric's chest. A mist of blood sprayed out, spattering his face. He looked down at the void in his chest. The towering fury and hatred in his eyes peeled away, bit by bit, replaced by vast incomprehension. Then his knees buckled beneath him, and he knelt down. His knees striking the stone echoed as heavy as a war drum. And directly before him lay Thuron's spirit tablet. Inside the quiet chamber, the seventh prince shot to his feet. A sickly, feverish flush spread across his face. Good. How satisfying. He coughed as if his lungs would tear, but the light in his eyes was scalding hot. Outside the arena, silence fell like a burial shroud. Auron lay sprawled on the stone, eyes locked on the kneeling corpse of his grandfather. His body shook, a sieve rattling with shock. From his throat scraped a hopeless, ragged rasp. Why, impossible! Kael released a long, turbid breath. Revenge for his foster father was finished. His body swayed. Twice. The wounds of relentless travel, battle after battle, crashed down like a mountain crumbling. A needle of pain lanced up from the marrow of his bones. His vision swam into black. Young master. Folly caught his arm, bracing his tottering frame with all her strength. Kael! Lorien's roar tore the air, his face dark as molten iron. You dare! You dare defy my command. Eldric was dead, slain by a single stroke under the City Lord's very nose. The Gu family's promised riches had slipped through his fingers, and his authority as Lord of Skyblade City lay trampled in the mud. Folly suddenly planted herself before Kael. Her voice rang out, far bolder than the simple, foolish girl she had once been. You're not fair. Those people framed the young master and tried to kill him. Why shouldn't he kill them? You protect those villains. That's unfair. Lorien laughed. Fury twisted into a blade of murderous light in his eyes. I am the Lord of Skyblade City. My word is law. City Lord Auron forced the words out, his venomous glare nailed to Kael. I beg you, kill Kael. Avenge my father and grandfather. In return, I will give you everything the Gu family possesses. A thwack. A longsword punched through his chest. The tip drove home with a dull, meaty sound that burst across the deathly silent arena. The blade crushed through his sternum and burst half a foot of frigid steel out his back. Blood gushed along the fuller like snapped strands of crimson pearls, splashing onto gray flagstones in stark, glaring blossoms. Auron's throat filled with frothing blood.
His eyes bulged. His lips fluttered soundlessly, and he collapsed.
Good. Very good. Lorien's fury had scorched so hot it circled back to an eerie calm. Beneath that calm, magma boiled. Kael, you commit murder again and again, right before my eyes. You truly do not give a damn about this city lord. Dozens of city guards surged through the crowd like ravening wolves, swords rasping from sheaths. A cage of cold steel encircled the arena. Vali is right. Kael clasped her hand gently, his body inching backward. Depleted spiritual power forced itself through his meridians, thrumming low and ominous. You are not fair. I have no need to respect you or your rules. Lorien's eyes slitted.
Seize him.
In the breath before Kael's muscles coiled taut and his power flared for a breakout, a shrill voice stabbed into every eardrum like a steel needle.
TCH, TCH, TCH.
Lord Liu, what astonishing authority you wield. The voice was too sharp, too caustic, scraping the teeth raw, yet carrying an indescribable weight of cold, crushing pressure. The very air shifted, not the motion of wind, but as if something ponderous and immense had settled down, making every breath thick and labored. Lorien's expression convulsed. Rage flipped instantly to shock and fear, which he forcibly hammered down into a mask of deep deference. He spun around and bowed toward the source.
Vic, manager, lie.
How did we disturb you?
Vic sauntered out, a stiff, humorless smile pasted on his face.
He glanced at Lorien.
Shall I command my own rules to be seized as well?
HM.
Lorien's heart lurched.
He bowed again, hurriedly. I would not dare.
I would not dare? He stole a furtive glance at Folly, saw she merely stared at Vic with curiosity and no flicker of recognition, and breathed a quiet sigh of relief.
Lord Liu.
Vic clasped his hands behind his back, too lazy to even lift his eyelids.
This old servant asks you, is the Valor Hall qualification battle finished?
It is finished.
Who won?
Lorien ground his teeth.
Against every grain of his will, he pointed at Kael. Him.
Vic did not so much as glance at Kael.
He tilted his chin up a fraction. Then there is no problem. The meaning was blatant. Kael's Valor Hall qualification was secured.
Vic turned to leave, inwardly cursing.
That brat once again, blind luck pisses on his head. Wait. Kael spoke.
Vic's steps halted.
Immeasurable impatience crawled across his face.
Where is this Dr. Zhu?
I wish to pay him a visit. Vic spat out an address in his needle, sharp voice, and left without another word, as if lingering even a moment longer would stain him with misfortune. Inside a quiet chamber, the seventh prince was about to tease him when a violent coughing fit erupted from his chest.
Frigid energy surged from his body in visible waves. Frost crystals spiderwebbed across his robes in an instant, ice crawling from his shoulders to his cuffs. His breath misted thick and white. The air around him plummeted in temperature. Wooden floorboards groaned and crackled under a spreading sheet of thin ice.
Your Highness. Vic's face went deathly pale. He slammed both palms against the seventh prince's back.
Spiritual power blazed into a crimson glow, flooding desperately into the meridians, tearing and grappling with the rabid, bone, deep cold poison.
Hold on. This old servant will take you to Dr. Zhu immediately.
Outside, Lorien's face had blackened past the bottom of a cauldron.
The seventh prince's word was not something he dared defy. He snorted, not sparing a look at anyone, and stalked off in a sweep of sleeves. Wait,
Kael said.
My Valor Hall qualification. Lorien shot him a lingering stare, murderous intent and bone, deep unwillingness blazing through it. Just wait. Someone will deliver it to you. The moment he was gone, the crowd erupted.
But Kael shut out every voice.
He stored Theron's spirit tablet and the Firecloud spear into his pack, then exhaled a deep, filthy breath. The savage, murderous miasma that had been festering inside him bled out with that one exhalation. Young master, where do we go next?
Folly asked softly.
To see Dr. Zhu. Kael ruffled her hair. To treat your illness. Young master, can my illness even be cured?
Nonsense.
Kael's expression was gentle, but his voice held the finality of forged steel. I will find a way to save you. All you have to do is stay by my side and help me hunt for treasures. With peace in your heart.
Ma'am.
At the mention of treasure hunting, Folly's eyes lit up instantly. Master and servant walked away from the arena. The slanted sun stretched Kael's shadow impossibly long. It swept over the scarred and ruined platform, over the dried blood baked into dark stains, reaching out into the distance. Behind him, the Gu family clansmen collapsed like mourners at a grave, sitting shattered on the ground, nothing left in their eyes but emptiness and despair. The Gu family was broken, utterly, cleanly broken. Within days, the circling, ravenous rival families would tear its holdings apart like a pack of wolves. And at the end of those despairing gazes, Kael Silu wet-walked onward, step by step, never looking back. City Lord's Mansion. Main Hall. A muffled crash. The teacup in Lorien's grip was crushed to dust. Shards of porcelain mixed with scalding tea coursed over the table. Wretched brat. His face was iron blue. The curse squeezed through his teeth nailed Ione to the floorboards the instant she stepped through the door. Father? Ione's heart jolted. She rushed forward. What happened? Kael. Lorien's sleeve snapped, the force blasting the remaining porcelain shards to the floor in a clatter. He recounted the events of the Valor Hall qualification battle in a few rough strokes, every single word ground out between his molars. All because of him. He made me lose every shred of face today. Ione felt the shock ripple through her. She had already heard that Kael's cultivation had been restored. But to pulverize the Gu family with only his own 2 hands, this battle prowess had exceeded every prediction. An inexplicable, bitter tightness rose in her chest, constricting her throat. By the way, Lorien lifted his gaze, tone switching abruptly. How goes your interaction with the 7th Prince? Why did he not take you with him today? Ione's expression stiffened. Vic's indifferent, cutting face loomed unbidden in her mind. Days of calculated ingratiation so painfully earned a sliver of the 7th Prince's goodwill, only for that old eunuch to crush her with a few offhand words and leave her humiliated. Her refusal to go today, when it came down to it, was simply an inability to swallow that public disdain. She had no desire to elaborate, and merely said vaguely, Father, you said just now that the 7th Prince intervened on Kael's behalf. Correct. Lorien's brow furrowed. What's strange is that Vic's attitude toward him was thoroughly cold. Cold? The tight bitterness in Ione's chest abruptly loosened. In an instant, she pieced together a conclusion. Kael had thrown his lot in with the 7th Prince, but Vic refused to accept him. A glint flashed through her eyes. Her inner resolve crystallized. Father, I will go see the 7th Prince. Perhaps I can learn some useful information. Very well. You will enter Valor Hall soon. Even if the 7th Prince lacks real influence, he is still of royal blood. Sending Ione to Valor Hall was no difficult matter for Lorien. An alley forgotten by the sun. Deep and narrow, its walls wept with moss, the mortar crumbling into dust. The last light of dusk slanted into the entrance, stretching the shadows of a few figures across the cracked flagstones like gaunt, twisted specters. Kael and Folly rounded the corner just as 5 or 6 men came into view, standing sentinel before a small courtyard. Their silks gleamed, their hair was sleek, their faces powdered pale. They stood with spines straight as swords, as if the very presence in this squalid alley was an insult they deigned to endure. Stewards of the Royal Trade Guild. Folly tilted her little face upward. Her voice was a soft, hopeful murmur. Young master, are we going to see Grandpa Zhu? Kael nodded. Dr. Zhu helped us greatly last time. We haven't thanked him properly. He stepped forward. 3 feet from the courtyard gate, an arm shot across his path, gold, thread embroidery on the cuff nearly stabbing his nose. The man's face was a masterpiece of arrogance. His disdainful glance swept over Kael's worn clothes, and he snorted, a sound like a blade drawn from a scabbard. What do you think you're doing? Boy, do you know no manners. You think you can just raise your hand to knock without Dr. Zhu summoning you. If you offend His Eminence, 10 lives would not be enough to pay. Another voice dripped with contempt. Showing up empty-handed, and you still expect the divine physician to see you? Go queue at the back. Rustics have no concept of decorum. The words flew, one after another, each exhaled with the Royal Trade Guild's extravagant haughtiness, as if they were not kneeling in a squalid alley but examining beggars at the doorstep of their own mansions. Folly's face went scarlet. Her little fists clenched, and she started forward. Stop looking down on us. I know that, Grandpa. A steward laughed, a brittle, mocking sound. Oh, you know him. Little missy, spout tall tales and see if you don't sprain your tongue. What status does Dr. Zhu hold? Even our guild's senior stewards must be utterly respectful. And you claim he knows you. Folly's voice caught in her throat. A deadly chill condensed in Kael's eyes. The killing intent had not yet spilled out when someone grabbed his arm and held on tight. It was Kaelan, last in line, his face purpled with strain. He hissed, his voice a desperate whisper. Little brother, endure it. They are all in the orifice-opening realm. You cannot afford to provoke them. Wait patiently, sooner or later, you will get an audience. A steward clicked his tongue. Tusk, Kaelan. How kind-hearted of you. Your contribution points have been dead last for years. You're about to be swept out of the treasure vault pavilion, and you still meddle in others' affairs. Kaelan's hand trembled violently, knuckles gone white. But he did not let go of Kael. The fire in Kael's chest surged upward, ready to erupt until a flicker of pale yellow at the far end of the alley snagged his peripheral gaze. A pale, yellow long dress, a silhouette of graceful curves. A light gauze veil obscured her face, leaving only a pair of frost-sharp, indifferent eyes exposed. She walked over the uneven flagstones, the hem of her skirt swaying faintly like a single tender petal fallen into the mud. So refined she seemed violently out of place in this rotting alley. Ione's gaze swept over the steward's fine silks and landed squarely on Kael. Their eyes met. One pair tempered by bloodshed and cold steel. The other bearing the self-righteous aloofness of one perched on high. Two gazes collided in the cramped alley like drawn bowstrings, nearly striking sparks from the air. Not a single word. Just a silent, cutting chill that split the dying sun. In the small courtyard's side chamber, fire, attributed spiritual power blazed like coiled dragons, enveloping the seventh prince's entire form. A sizzling crackle filled the air, the microscopic hiss of blistering heat grinding against the cyan, black cold poison seeping from his skin. Ice and fire wrestled in a space 2 inches deep, churning up a fine white mist that filled the room. Dr. Zoo's eyes were webbed with bloodshot lines. Every single finger trembled faintly as fire. Intent suppressed the latest rebound, but his own face was already washed in the gray of exhaustion. Vic's voice quavered so badly it barely held together. Dr. Zoo, is there any way to save His Highness? Dr. Zoo slowly shook his head. He stared at the seventh prince, who sat cross-legged opposite, eyes shut tight, and spoke in a voice like dead wood. The cold poison has long since burrowed into the very marrow of his bones. It has merged with the fibers of his life force. Every suppression guarantees a rebound. This old man has reached the end of his strength. He paused, his cracked lips moving as he forced out the words. I can still barely suppress it this time. But the next eruption, he sighed, a sound like old leaves crumbling. Vic was struck as if by lightning. He could not stand steady, and a choking sob rolled from his throat. Your Highness, Her Grace, the consort, had only you, her single son. If anything happens to your Highness, this old servant's death 10,000 times over could not atone. A feeble voice cut through his lament. Manager lie. The seventh prince slowly opened his sunken eyes, his face white as parchment. Yet the corner of his mouth curved into a faint, serene smile. I know my condition. If not for you and Dr. Zoo traveling everywhere for my sake these years, I would never have lived to this day. Even if my mother knew from the springs below, she would never blame you. Cheating death, it seemed, had leached the fear of it from his bones. He turned his head slightly, his gaze unfocused yet carrying the shallowest, lightest trace of curiosity. Speaking of which, I met a very interesting man today. By coincidence, Dr. Zoo, you know him as well. Outside, the dying sun bled crimson. Folly had just opened her mouth to call out when the memory from a month ago sealed her throat shut. Her little cheeks puffed out, and she turned her head away in a huff. Ione's voice was as indifferent as well water. Kael, I've heard about your affairs. His reply was a blade of ice. Your information travels fast. What are you doing here? That is hardly the young Miss Liu's concern, is it? A flicker of displeasure passed through Ione's brows, swiftly suppressed. She had already concluded Kael's presence here meant he had sworn himself under the seventh prince's banner, a mere subordinate. Her tone flattened, carrying the admonishing loftiness of condescension. The most vital principle in life is to know one's place. The calamity you suffered before came from too much exposed arrogance. If you do not learn restraint, even if you dodge this blow, you will not dodge the next. Kael laughed coldly. There was not a ripple of fluctuation in that laugh, only the hard, tempered edge of 1,000 battles. How I, Kael, conduct myself is not for you to dictate. I've said my piece. Whether you listen is your affair. Ione said no more. She turned and walked toward the courtyard gate, raising a hand to knock. The steward at the front interposed himself again, his eyes rolling up and down Ione's form with insolence.
And who are you?
Another here to see Dr. Zhu. Ione's light veil lifted faintly, her voice unhurried. My father is the city lord, Lorien. I am here to see the seventh prince. I am his friend. The final two words she enunciated with the lightest emphasis, casting a cool glance at Kael as she spoke them. City lord's daughter. Friend of the seventh prince. The steward's expression warped, his arrogance freezing instantly on his face. Outside the courtyard wall, the stewards from the imperial capital clustered around Ione, their former haughtiness metamorphosed into fawning servility. So Lady Liu knows the seventh prince. Our deepest apologies, deepest apologies. We hope you will forgive our earlier rudeness, young miss. We beg the young miss might put in a good word for us before Dr. Zhu. We have stood guard for days without getting near that shabby door. Ione smiled, elegant and serene, her artist's steps swaying like a willow in a breeze. Her peripheral glance flicked over Kael, and she said blandly, Once I see the seventh prince, I will naturally pass along a word on your behalf. As if granted a royal reprieve, he stewards showered her with another round of flattery. Folly tugged at Kael's sleeve, her face the picture of indignation. Young master, that grandpa clearly called for us too. Why do they only believe her? Kael's lips quirked, and he tossed out a few cold, hard words. Dogs judging men by their station, the stewards' faces darkened ominously. What did you say, boy? A wandering cultivator from the sticks, daring to act this insolent before imperial capital stewards. Their auras subtly locked onto Kael. But Kael was utterly unafraid. He took Folly's hand and strode forward boldly. You say we can't go in. Today I insist on going in. Come, Folly. Kaelan was frantic, stamping his feet. Little brother, these people truly dare to act. At that moment, from inside the courtyard, an old voice burst out in delighted surprise. Little girl, how did you find your way here? Come in, let this old man have a good look at you. It was exactly Dr. Zhu. The stewards instinctively looked at Ione, their eyes a tangle of suspicion and hope. Ione kept her composure perfect, though her heart skipped. She still swept a graceful bow. Thank you, Eldric. The small wooden door burst open. Vic, a bellyful of fire scorching his gut, lashed out in a blistering tirade. A bunch of filthy, low-born curs. You dare disturb the seventh prince and Dr. Zhu at their rest. This old servant will slap every one of you dead right here, the words themselves crushed down, heavy with malice. The stewards stood frozen, as if plunged into an ice cavern, their necks shrinking into their collars. Vic's gaze landed on Folly, and his face twitched. His voice scraped out, brittle and forced. Little girl, come with this old servant. Folly pointed at herself, eyes wide and blank. You're calling me? But you said we weren't familiar with each other. A muscle jumped beneath Vic's eye. He swallowed the embers of his temper and spat out the words. Dr. Zhu wants to see you. Kael nearly choked on a laugh. He strode right past Vic, savoring the sight of the black-faced eunuch humbled. Folly suddenly remembered something. She turned and beckoned to Kaelan, her voice bright. You want to see Grandpa Zhu too? Kaelan's head bobbed like a pecking bird. Yes. Yes, then come along. You spoke up for the young master earlier. You're a good person, Kaelan's heart soared. He scrambled after them, hardly believing that one small kindness had traded into a karmic windfall beyond his wildest dreams. Vic's lips convulsed with the words he dared not speak. Dr. Zhu's inexplicable protection of the girl forced his hand. He swallowed every objection, grinding out a single syllable through clenched teeth. Follow, outside the courtyard, the steward's jealousy burned hot enough to split their eye sockets. Their desperate glances swung toward Ione. Ione drew a deep breath, planted a flawless smile upon her face, and stepped forward with a bow. Manager Lai, His Highness the Seventh. He has no time to see you. Vic hurled the words like shards of ice. Then, unsatisfied, he added, Who do you think you're fooling with that painted pretense? Kael could not hold it in any longer. A laugh burst out of him. Vic whipped his head around, voice slicing the air. Boy, what are you laughing at now? I think what you just said was perfectly reasonable. Kael gave him a thumbs up. For the first time, he found this eunuch not entirely detestable. The courtyard gate slammed shut with a bang, severing the venomous stairs outside. Ione's face flushed crimson, then drained white in rapid waves. Her chest heaved, her skin prickling under the steward's needle, sharp gazes. She bit down on her lip, stripped of every shred of dignity, and fled.
Her humiliated silhouette vanished swiftly at the alley's mouth. Inside the courtyard, Kaelin stood rooted, palms slick with excitement. Simply stepping into this yard was a luxury those outside would never touch in a lifetime. In the side chamber, Dr. Zhu extended a gaunt, withered palm. He held it 3 inches above Folly's forehead. A hazy green luminescence spilled from his fingertips, warm and soft as spring willow fluff, seeping strand by strand into Folly's glabella. A faint golden ripple spread soundlessly at her spirit platform, like a stone dropped into an ancient well, carrying an indescribable, numinous strangeness. The green light retracted. Dr. Zhu opened his eyes, his voice weathered but calm. Your master's pills have slowed the dissipation of her soul force. There is no major danger in the short term. The iron tension in Kael's shoulders loosened. He clasped his fists. Thank you, honored senior. Folly gave a sweet, precise bow. Thank you, Grandpa Zhu. Dr. Zhu ruffled the top of her head, a rare softness warming his eyes. He turned to Kael and nodded, his gaze carrying the weight of assessment. You guarded your heart and did not lose your original intent. Most of your killing, miasma, has dispersed. That is rare indeed. The 7th Prince leaned against the Dabed, his pale face curving into a faint smile. Watching you mete out vengeance so freely earlier truly made this man on death's doorstep burn with envy. Kael clasped his fists solemnly. I owe the 7th Prince for today's intervention. Kael will remember. Vic's brow shot up, his tone a blade of indignation. Boy, this is the 7th Prince of our great Kai. Show some proper respect. Kael did not even lift his eyelids, as if a fly had merely buzzed past his ear. The 7th Prince waved a self-deprecating hand. This prince's status only props up an empty frame before outsiders. He shifted his gaze to Kael and coughed quietly. Speaking of which, that ember serpent you gave Dr. Zhu could be considered a help to me. I was born with innate yin cold invading my body. Someone's attack wounded my foundation while I was still in my mother's womb. Without Dr. Zhu pouring his heart's blood into suppressing it, I would not have survived past 2 years old. But now the cold has sunk deep into my bone marrow. Even Dr. Zhu has no further recourse. Folly's eyes brimmed with pure sympathy. You're so pitiful. The 7th Prince smiled, a ghost of acceptance. Everyone has their own fate. No use forcing it. Silence descended upon the room. Kael's brow furrowed deeper and deeper. Through his mind flashed the 7th Prince's effortless rescue, the ambush before the Valor Hall qualification. Grace repaid tenfold, grudge repaid tenfold. He suddenly lifted his eyes, each word falling with absolute clarity. I want to try. Vic stared, his voice dripping disbelief. What did you say? I said, I want to try to treat the 7th Prince, you. Vic's laughter scraped like a rusted blade. His voice turned shrill. Even Dr. Zhu is helpless against this terminal affliction, and you, a whelp who's barely opened his meridians, think you have a fart of a solution. Kael's gaze remained terrifyingly calm. And what if I do? Vic's rage flipped into savage amusement. He jabbed a finger toward the beast cores glowing beside the prince's table, their layered light pulsing. Boy, do you see those? If you actually have that ability, this old servant will swallow the damn things alive. Kael did not speak again. He slowly closed his eyes. The moment his eyelids fell, the feverish air around him receded like a tide pulling back to the sea. His breathing stretched long and deep, heavy with density. He became an ancient sword, sliding at last into its sheath, its naked edge fully retracted, nothing left but the pure intent of the blade hidden within. His hair and the hem of his robes lifted, weightless, for a single breath, then fell eerily still. All sound seemed siphoned from the space around him. His spirit sense plunged fathomless, sinking into an impenetrable, unfathomable silence. Within the sword bastille, the void's darkness coalesced into mist, like chains, churning soundlessly. Shade sensed Kael's spiritual consciousness, and a quiver entered his tone. Boy, back again. Strange. What happened to that murderous aura inside you? Dissipated completely. A pity, a genuine pity. If you'd built your foundation upon that baleful energy, walking my demonic path would have been a meteoric rise. So have you considered it properly this time? Ready to become this Lord's personal disciple, and not interested, Kael's refusal left not the smallest crack. I'm here to thank you. Shade's heart jolted. Release me. Haven't yet worked out what kind of thanks. Shade choked, fury rising, but he remembered all too well how thick-skinned and black-hearted this kid was. He forced his voice through clenched teeth. Then out with whatever the hell you need to say. I have a friend suffering from a poison of extreme cold.
Kael paused a beat. Can you know? Shade roared, the darkness trembling. I told you already, this lord only knows how to kill, not how to save. Tell him to wait for death. Kael fell silent, ready to withdraw. Wait, Shade's tone abruptly softened, cunning threading through it. It's not that there's no method. However, this lord wants you to agree to one thing, as long as it isn't freeing you. Of course not. Shade had long abandoned that particular hope. A future favor. Once this lord decides what it shall be, you must repay it. Kael hesitated only a moment. Fine. I agree. Shade felt a flicker of surprise, but wasted no time. He cut straight to the heart, his voice dripping ancient knowledge. The chill inside his body has long invaded the marrow. In a sense, he already possesses a body of extreme cold, albeit a low-grade one. Suppressing it is completely unnecessary. With the right cultivation art, that cold energy won't just stop being lethal, it can transform into fuel for his advancement. Though admittedly, his future accomplishments will only be middling at best. Kael's gaze sharpened. You have such an art, looted from someone. Shade waved a hand, indifferent. In that single gesture, the darkness of the entire sword bastille contracted violently. The mist like chains roiled and coiled as if seething, releasing soundless shrieks. Shade's fingertip ripped through the empty space, trailing a glacial, blue track of ice crystals behind it. The track condensed and spread at blinding speed, in the blink of an eye, forming a scripture of runes through which bone, penetrating cold flowed. The temperature in that soul realm plummeted. Frost visible to the naked eye froze across the spiritual space. A stabbing, yin ice deep enough to flay the spirit itself, stabbed in, like countless frozen needles, a merciless frigidity that could tear apart even divine consciousness. Kael's soul, body shivered, a thin glimmer of resistance flickering against the creeping cold. The floating runes writhed alive. Each character coiled like an ice, serpent of deep azure, hissing, bearing jagged fangs, madly drilling into his mind along the track of his gaze. At the top of the art, 4 characters blazed like frozen stars, *9 Netherfrost Soul Art *. The question clawed out of Kael's throat, raw with pain. What rank is this? Shade's voice dripped contempt. Judging by your realm's labels, heaven, rank, I suppose. Kael's heart jolted. Heaven, rank. Across the entire Great Kai, they might not produce even one. And this being tossed it out like garbage. He drew a shaking breath, staring at the floating scripture. Heaven rank arts like this, do you have many? This lord collects only the finest specimens. Rubbish arts don't deserve my sight. Shade's smile was inscrutable. Deep in Kael's eyes, a fierce light blazed, the joy of discovering a boundless treasure vault. He lingered no longer. His spiritual awareness snapped back. The candle flame shuddered. Kael's eyes flew open. Young master, you're awake. Folly swiped drool from her mouth. Vic's voice trembled. B-boy, have you found a way? Dr. Zhu and 7th Prince Joran stared at him, breaths utterly stilled. Kael exhaled slowly. He sifted through Shade's words and spoke. Your Highness, the cold energy in your body has long since forged a physique of extreme cold. No need to suppress it. Seek no antidote. You only need a compatible cultivation art. That cold energy will become your greatest asset. Far from killing you, your cultivation speed will outstrip ordinary practitioners. A deathly stillness gripped the room. The candle wick popped softly. Why? You're saying His Highness possesses a special physique. Vic's grip on his whisk nearly slipped. A fiery, urgent hope kindled in 7th Prince Joran's eyes. His whole frame quivered. Kael had meant to say low grade, but catching that gaze, he forced the words aside. You could have put it that way. Within the side chamber, Vic's aged face streamed with tears. His gaunt hand clutched his sleeve so fiercely, the knuckles blanched white. Do you see it? Your Highness, he possesses a special physique. If the Imperial Consort's spirit dwells below, she can rest at ease. Folly sidled up to Kael and murmured. Young master is a special physique, that great. Kael rubbed his nose. The words asterisk, not worth a damn asterisk, nearly slipped out. He swallowed them and mumbled, it's decent. Compared to an illusion-bane eye, it wasn't even worth mentioning. Dr. Zhu stroked his beard with a long sigh. Young friend, your insight far surpasses this old man. All I ever did was suppress the frost poison. Never once did I think to nourish his very marrow with an art of extreme cold. I am ashamed, but 7th Prince Joran's face curdled into the bitter pallor of dead ash. It's too late, Elder Zhu. How long can I even drag on? The next flare of the frost poison, I fear not even immortals could save me. A bomb detonated in Vic's chest. His head snapped up, eyes wild as a cornered beast. Your Highness must never give up. Even if this old servant must tramp across every inch of the eastern wastelands, I will find an art for you. Folly's gaze dimmed. She murmured, he's so pitiful. Kael finally cleared his throat. About that, I have the art. Vic froze as if he had misheard. What did you say? I said, I have the art. Kael repeated it with flat calm. Seventh Prince Joran bolted upright, shaking from head to toe. His Adam's apple rolled. No words came. Vic's face swelled crimson, purple. His lips quavered. Then can you give? Kael said nothing. He just watched the sharp, tongued old eunuch, veins bulging across his temples. Vic suddenly clenched his jaw. With a violent sweep of his sleeve, he scooped up every beast core lying beside the prince and crammed them wholesale into his mouth. A grinding roar, like millstone's crushing stone, tore from his throat. His withered gullet contorted and heaved, forcing down the jagged, brutal-edged beast cores. The next instant, crimson fire, intent dropped like a red, hot brand into his belly. It slammed headlong into the serpent, cold frost intent lurking in his meridians. Two opposing forces went berserk inside his channels, savaging each other in a death spiral. His face flickered in ghastly alternation, blue, then white, then blue again. Veins burst across his forehead like fat earthworms. His whole body seized with tremors, yet he fought to stay on his feet. Manage your lie, Seventh Prince Joran cried out. The old eunuch's mouth split into a smile uglier than a weeping ghost. Back in the day, the imperial consort plucked this servant from the mud. This life has always belonged to her. Your Highness is her only blood and bone. For a sliver of hope to save you, do you think I'd balk at swallowing beast cores? I'd kneel till my knees cracked to dust. As he spoke, his legs buckled, about to smash to the floor. Kael's head throbbed. He grabbed the old eunuch's arm, hoisting him up. What I meant to say, even if you hadn't eaten those beast cores, I'd have given you the art anyway. Vic's expression stiffened into a comical mask. Strangled rasps gurgled from his throat. After a long pause, he forced words through clenched teeth. Why didn't you say so sooner? Didn't get the chance. Remembering the indignity, the old eunuch's face twitched so violently he looked ready to hack the beast cores back out of his stomach. Folly doubled over, hugging her belly with laughter. Dr. Zhu took his cue and rose. With a flick of his sleeve and a faint smile, he said, the person outside must be here for me. Perfect timing. Now that His Highness's problem has a solution, this old man will go receive a guest and keep clear of secrets. Kael started to speak, but Dr. Zhu waved him off and pushed the door open, striding out. Silence fell again. Kael hesitated no longer. He began to recite the asterisk, 9 Netherfrost Soul Art asterisk, word by word. The instant the first syllable dropped, the temperature inside the room plunged. Visible white frost crystallized at Kael's lips, and a gossamer ice mist curled along his breath. The air itself seemed robbed of moisture, condensing into fine suspended ice crystals. In Seventh Prince Joran's spirit platform, something long slumbering erupted awake with a roar. For the first time, the cold energy that had lain dormant for years resonated unbidden. Wisps of frost, mist seeped from his pores, and beneath his feet, silent cobweb, thin ice flowers bloomed across the floorboards. He was bewitched by the words. When Kael's last syllable settled, Vic jolted out of his trance. His voice came out tight. I've lived most of a lifetime and never beheld an art so profoundly divined, raid heaven tier, the asterisk 9 Netherfrost Soul Art asterisk. Kael dropped the words without mercy. Heaven tier? A twin gasp slashed the air as their minds blanked. The Grand Kai Empire's hoarded apex manuals reached only mystic, tier high, grade. The very notion of heaven tier was beyond their dreams. Now, staring at Kael, they felt as though an abyss of unfathomable depth spread behind that boy's figure. Seventh Prince Joran bent forward in a bow, so deep his head nearly touched the floor. His voice was hoarse, each word hammered like an oath. Brother Gu, such grace defies thanks. If I, Joran, ever breathe a word of today's matter, may heaven strike me dead and earth destroy me. Kael drew Folly's hand into his own. The sooner you begin your cultivation, the sooner you'll break free of torment. Brother Jiang will meet again in the imperial capital. With that, he turned and left, Folly at his side. Outside the courtyard, Dr. Zhu pressed a bottle of pills into Kaelan's hand. Kaelan's face flushed deep red. His lips moved faintly, but in the end he just clasped his fists with force. Many thanks, Elder Zoo. Then he spun on his heel and strode swiftly away. In a shadowed corner, several stewards whose pleas for medical help had been refused fixed their eyes on Kaelan's retreating back. Greed and cruelty mingled in their gazes. One lowered his voice. That fellow got a personal gift from Dr. Zoo, and I'll bet he's carrying no shortage of beast cores. Once he's past the city gates, we'll give him a proper sen. Doff, the others nodded slowly. A murderous chill seeped into the air. At the city gate, Kaelan offered 1,000 thanks and more before vanishing into the crowd, the spirit pills tucked against his chest, his strides buoyant with joy. But in a side alley, a handful of figures tracked his back with eyes of cold, scalding envy. Their hushed words flickered out like a serpent's tongue, tasting the air with killing intent. Within the small courtyard, bamboo shadows lay cross-hatched and still. Dr. Zoo sat alone on a stone stool, his calloused thumb rubbing a broken jade charm. The ancient fragment pulsed, a threadbare, amber glow, and in that light, a deep, buried heartache flitted through his gaze, only to be swallowed by grim resolve. He tucked the jade away and lifted his eyes to Kael. This 7th prince is out of danger. Good, Kael said. Dr. Zoo released a long breath, as if chains around his ribs had finally slackened. Then this old man can depart with a light heart. Grandpa Zoo Folly's voice quivered like a reed in winter wind. Dr. Zoo bent low, his old hand rustling through her hair, and for a breath, ancient pain surfaced in his eyes. Years ago, fleeing a calamity, I fled into Great Kai. The 7th prince's mother saved my life. So I stayed to suppress his frost poison. 20 years gone in a breath. Now that the debt is settled, it's time I tended to my own affairs. He paused, slipped a storage ring from his finger, and pressed it gently into Folly's palm. She stood stunned, her small hands turning the ring over and over. The metal was chill, yet it seemed to sear her heart. Suddenly, the ring shimmered, shrank before her eyes, and slid onto her slender finger with a sharp, star-like glint. Dr. Zoo's throat worked. He turned to Kael, and his voice dropped like a stone into deep water. You mean to enter Valor Hall? The Imperial capital is deep water factions bristle like blades. Every step weigh it well. Senior, my thanks. Kael clasped his fist, iron in his words. Days later, beneath a leaden sky, Kael casually finished tending his wounds and led Folly out of the city. In the gate tunnel, a damp wind curled around them, and there, Lorien strode past with a troop of guards. Shoulder to shoulder they passed, not a glance shifting. The captain of the guards leaned in to speak, but Lorien's icy glare crushed the words before they could rise. Only the ghost of a derisive scoff trailed into the wind. 10 some miles beyond the walls, the wilds fell silent. Without warning, several figures burst from the roadside, the patriarchs of Skyblade City, cradling dimensional pouches and wearing smiles of exquisite deference. Brother Goo, you've kept us waiting. A trifling gift. Please accept it. Kael took the dimensional pouch and swept it with his spirit sense. Origin crystals lay stacked in neat rows over 10,000 by rough count. His brow arched slightly. He said nothing more, a calm I appreciate the thought, and tucked the pouch into his robes. The patriarchs exhaled as if a blade had lifted from their necks, stammered their courtesies, and scattered, their flattery torn to shreds by the wilderness wind. Night rolled in across the edge of the savage expanse. Kael chose a hollow behind a towering boulder and kindled a campfire. Flames licked the darkness, and Folly sat hugging a seared chunk of beast meat, grease-dripping, her bright eyes dancing with the fire. Kael settled cross-legged and laid out every resource he carried: beast cores, spirit tools, and over 17,000 origin crystals, heaped into a faintly glowing mound. He shut his eyes and focused his intent. The scattered crystals flared hot, then one by one dimmed at a visible pace, crumbling to silent dust. Dense spiritual essence whirled in a misty vortex, surging madly into every pore of his body, and the campfire itself seemed to flatten beneath the pull. Folly bit off a mouthful of meat and watched the crystals vanish, her voice muffled. Young master, M. Kael opened his eyes. Young master, we're so poor. He glanced over their drastically diminished hoard and let out a bitter laugh. If I'd known, I wouldn't have been so generous. Days passed in the blink of an eye. Deep within Wildwood, the stench of rotting leaves hung thick in the damp air. Kael slipped a fist-sized azure spirit fruit into his pouch. Dewdrops slid from a leaf, splashing onto his shoulder. This is it? Folly laughed joyfully, her small face smudged with dirt. Over these past few days, guided by her talent, the two had gathered 5 spirit herbs, two of which were far superior in quality to the original umbral ginseng. Adding the beast cores from slain demon beasts along the way, their haul was tantamount to half a year's bloody struggle for an ordinary rogue cultivator. As for the two groups glimpsed in the distance, they were nothing more than blurry silhouettes flickering through forest gaps, swallowed in an instant by the dense layers of ancient trees. Young master ahead. Folly suddenly stiffened, her bright, watery eyes wide as saucers, her fingertip pointing toward a tangled thicket of vines. What a great big ball of light. This one's definitely worth a fortune. Kael's pupils contracted. He shoved off the ground, shooting forward like an arrow loosed from its string. In the depths of the dense forest, an ancient vine, as thick as an arm, crept along the ground. Its length was covered in grayish-brown thorns half an inch long, its rough skin gleaming with a corpse-like matte sheen in the dim light. At the vine's tip hung a purple bud the size of a human head, its flower petals tightly furled like a slumbering creature, breathing in secret. Kael's heart chilled. Such bizarre-looking flowers were everywhere in Wildwood. Without Folly's gift, anyone would have dismissed it as common poison ivy. He set Folly down and reached for the bud. Just as his fingertips were about to touch the flower petals, bzzz, the deathly still air shuddered. The vine lashed out like a giant python, struck at its vital spot, its thick body rearing up with a sickening, sinewy crunch. With a piercing shriek of wind, it swept toward Kael's waist. The hundreds of thorns along its length bristled all at once, gleaming with cold malice in the shadows. Young master, watch out. Folly shrieked. Come on! Kael's eyes blazed with fierce light. A spirit herb that fought back, the stronger the resistance, the more priceless the treasure within the bud. Shink the sword hummed like a dragon's roar. A silver arc of light cleaved the gloom, slicing precisely through the center of the surging vine. Where the blade passed, the thick vine and its thorns were severed cleanly. Violet-black sap gushed from the wound like blood from a slit vein. Sizzle! The instant the sap hit the air, it burst into a dense, deep, purple poison mist. The air crackled with a chorus of hissing, as if something was madly corroding the very space. Wherever the miasma touched, vegetation blackened and withered in an instant. Fallen leaves curled and charred, even the soil eroded into pitted scars. Kael inhaled a single breath. His mind reeled instantly, his vision warping. The flow of spiritual power through his meridians turned sluggish and thick, as if sludge had been poured into them. Volley! Reacting with lightning speed, he scooped her up with one arm and shot backward, retreating from the poison cloud in an instant. When he let go, cold sweat soaked his back. He'd been careless. The vine's thorns were just a decoy. The true killer was this flesh, melting poison. Even at his current cultivation, he could barely endure the vertigo. If even a trace had touched Folly, the consequences would be unthinkable. The dangers of Wildwood were never just empty words. A cold alarm slashed through his heart, dousing the excitement of his recent gains. He looked at Folly. Wait here. Before his words faded, he had already turned and plunged headlong into the violet miasma, which had now spread for yards in every direction. Young master! Folly's heart leaped into her throat. Thick mist engulfed him. The moment he entered, a fierce vertigo surged from his limbs and bones. Kael clenched his jaw, held his breath, and locked his gaze on that blurry purple shape at the center of the miasma. He swung his arm, the sword light slashing out again. The edge cut precisely into the joint where bud met vine, TSS. The instant the bud separated from the stalk, a faint, piercing shriek stabbed into his mind, sharp as the death cry of some living thing. In the next moment, violet, black poison burst from the severed stem like a ruptured blood sac. The miasma's density skyrocketed, thickening almost into a solid substance, submerging everything in a deep, purple abyss. The poison mist was pervasive, searing pain drilling into him through every pore, seeping through flesh, spreading through his organs, flooding his meridians. Dizziness drowned all his senses like a tide. Just as his legs gave way and he nearly staggered to the ground, bzzz. Deep within his meridians, the long, dormant silver vortex suddenly awakened, spinning madly. A terrifying suction erupted from its core, yanking all the invading violet poison into itself. Silver light roiled. The vortex ground the toxins to dust, dissolving them, then refined them into fine streams of pure spiritual energy, which flowed like a clear spring into his limbs and bones. Kael's eyes snapped open, a cold silver glint flashing in their depths. The dizziness shattered, his mind was sharp. Opportunity! He stomped hard, his body crashing through layer after layer of miasma, slicing through the thick poison haze like a blade. He burst out, wreathed in lingering violet smoke. "Young master," Folly cried out, her eyes reddening. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," Kael rasped, the corner of his lips curving into an almost invisible smile. He looked down at the unassuming purple bud in his hand, his heart at ease. That mutated meridian was truly miraculous, this poison. Immune constitution was likely more precious than any heaven-tier cultivation art. But at that moment, a sharp whistle cut the air. A floche adotor passed him at an impossible speed. Kael's pupils shrank. His spiritual perception had given not a single trace of warning. Every hair on his body stood on end. Cold sweat soaked his robes in an instant. There was only one explanation. This newcomer's cultivation was far above his own. Before he could even exhale, the streaking shadow abruptly doubled back in midair. Whoosh, the afterimage hadn't even dispersed before the real body arrived. Air screamed as it was ripped apart, the shockwave scattering leaves in all directions. A young man in white solidified before Kael, his robes snapping as he halted, an ancient sword slung across his back. Tall and straight, he cut an impressive figure. Kael's heart sank. Instinctively, he pulled Folly behind him. "Damn it!" He came back. He must be after the bud in my hand. The mountain winds howled like caged beasts, but on the jutting rock ledge, a sudden stillness fell. A spirit herb shimmered there, its emerald light rippling with untold power. Yet the young man in white did not look at it. He stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the lone figure before him. Then, with a swift, deliberate motion, he cupped his fists. Shame and raw urgency warred across his features. His voice emerged, dragging with it the weight of 1,000 regrets. "Young brother," he rasped, his tone a shattered echo of pride. A breathless pause stretched between them like a drawn blade. Then, in a burst of desperate resolve, the words tumbled out. "Help me out."